Hello everyone, my name is Jennifer Stay. This is Coloring Bliss. I have little Rose with me, and today we're going to teach you how to paint a flower with watercolor pencils. I have 5 basic tips to get you started and make you feel confident and ready to paint those flowers. So let's get started. Okay, so tip 1 of my 5 quick tips to get you going with your painting of flowers is that you can take a shortcut and try painting pre-illustrated flowers. This could be in coloring books, it could be stamped images, it could be things that you download off the internet. Now, the good thing about doing this is that you can learn from the illustrators. How did they design and lay out the flowers? How can you do it next time that you're going to be drawing the flowers? So using a pre-illustrated image like this one right here can really help. It will train your eye and get you started in with painting right away. So that's tip 1. Tip 2. This one is all about paper. Now we're going to be using watercolor pencils, and that means we're going to be adding water to this subject that we are coloring. Now, watercolor paper is really special. It has a special treatment on it called sizing, and it kind of floats on the top of the surface of the paper and allows for your water and your other liquidy items to sort of float and move on the top of that paper before it soaks in. Standard paper like cardstock, that is more like thousands of little tiny paper sponges ready to grab onto anything liquid. That includes alcohol markers, all of it. So when you're working with one paper or the other, you need to keep the properties in mind so that you can have the best success. For me today, we're going to be working on cardstock because I'm working out of this book right here. So it's not anything special, just a beautiful, strong, lovely cardstock paper, but it will soak up that water really fast. So we'll have to deal with that when the time comes. Tip 3 is all about the actual pencils that you choose to work with. And I have a video for you. It's one that we created 3 years ago where we put head to head 26 different brands of watercolor pencils to see which ones were best. We were looking for how easy they were to activate, how pigmented they were, their cost, their availability, whether they're open stock. All of those things were taken into consideration. So I'd highly recommend you go check out that video. As in most art products, the more you spend, typically the better quality it is. But that's not necessarily true of everything, and you can get a nice mid-grade watercolor pencil that will work really well for you if you're on a budget. But don't go for the cheap ones because they have very limited capabilities as you're learning, and you're going to feel like it's your fault, but it's actually your tools failing you. Today I'm going to be working with the beautiful, magnificent Faber-Castell Albrecht Durer pencils. This is my set here. I have the full set, lots of colors to choose from, highly pigmented pencils, high light fastness, easy to activate with water. There's nothing really bad to say about this line of pencils other than it is a little bit pricey, but totally worth saving up for them if you have time and the willingness to wait for saving up for these pencils. We also have them set up in our tritone system that we do here at Coloring Bliss, where we have 3 pencils chosen for every color on the color wheel. So if you do own the Albrecht Durers, we can help you with organizing them. I'll put a link to that system in the video description as well if you're interested. Step 4 and 5 gets us into actually painting our flowers. So let's pull out some colors and decide what color we want to do this. I'm just feeling pinks and reds on this one here. Maybe some oranges in the middle. Wouldn't that be pretty? So we'll go for reds and oranges for this. And I'm going to grab, let's see, this is a really pretty red right here. Grab that one. And we'll start with this one here. I have chosen Pale Geranium Lake number 121 out of my Albrecht Durer pencils. You can see on Faber-Castell they always put a little paintbrush on the pencil if it's a water-soluble pencil. I think that's really smart. A lot of brands do that as well. So if you ever see a little paintbrush on your pencil, that's what it's indicating, that it's water-soluble. Did you know that, Steve?
I did. Because of you.
Because I taught him that. Okay, so what we're going to do is use a paintbrush and some water. So I have some water here. And step number 4, or tip number 4, is to use your pencil for a base layer. So I'm just going to grab a basic round brush here, nothing special, and I need a paper towel. Okay, I think we are set. So I'm going to do these outer petals here in the red, and then we'll bring in more of a red orangey orange type color in these center petals. That's my general plan. So to get a nice base layer going, we're going to paint with these brushes, with these pencils, and this right here is a number 8 round, in case you're interested. It's by Creative Mark. It's called the Mimic line, and it's a good basic starter watercolor brush. If you're looking for a good brush, look for the Creative Mark Mimic line. They have sets of them, or you can buy them individually. Okay, so I'm going to get my brush a little wet, and I'm going to actually touch the tip of the pencil to pick up the pigment, the paint, the color right off the tip of the pencil. Now I am working on cardstock here, so I need to think of the paper as little sponges, and it's going to grab it and soak it in fast. So I need to be really ready for it to soak in and not expect it to float on the top and take much time. Okay, there, I worked it in really fast. What we end up with is a very soft, light background color. So basically it's a base layer. Now I'm going to be able to work on top of that base layer, but I'm going to go around and fill in all of those little petals really quick so you can enjoy watching this beautiful color go onto the flower. One of the best parts of using watercolor is that it can lay down different varieties of tone. So sometimes you're going to get a really deep dark red that will come out. Sometimes it'll be really watered down. It'll be a much more pale pinky type color. But that's what makes watercolor so beautiful. You get such a variety of tones, and you just embrace it. Don't force it all to be one color. Just let it do what it's going to do. Okay, so that's the main idea behind step 4, is to use your watercolor pencils as a paint and get a base layer going. Now, if you're like me and you're working on a cardstock, then we need to let those little sponges I was talking about have a moment to dry and sort of shrink back up. Those sponges can be very delicate, and if you go on top of it right away, it can sort of dig and pill is what they call it, when the little fibers of the paper come away from the actual surface of the paper. We don't want that to happen. So I'm going to give it just a minute to settle, let all those little sponges calm down, and then we'll go on to tip number 5. All right, so tip 4 was all about using it as paint and laying down a wet surface. Tip 5 is now to use the exact same pencil, only we're going to use it dry, and we're going to start adding in some shading. So pretty much what I'm going to do, I'm not going to worry about light source right now. I'm just going to worry about creating depth and shading and dimension, just as if there was one general light hitting this flower, okay? So what we're going to do is look at everywhere there's a petal that's overlapping what we just did. So this petal right here is overlapping this petal. So I'm going to use my dry pencil and just do light pressure and add some shading. Just like that. It's so fast and easy, you guys. So if you can remember to do the step 4, which is a quick base layer with the paint, and then using the same pencil come in and do some shading. Just like this. Now if you feel like your shading is a little too harsh, like right in here, the tip must have been a little bit soft from the water because we have a little bit more than I would have liked. So I'm going to grab my brush, get it wet, but then really dry it off so it's very dry, and look. Spread it out so it looks equal, and that fixed that problem immediately. These are so forgiving and so much fun, and I'm not even on a watercolor paper. This is just cardstock, which is really fun to me that you can use these this way. Okay, now again, remember how I talked about how when you're using watercolors, sometimes it comes down really dark pigmented and sometimes it comes down lightly because it's watered down. Look how pretty that is, the way it lays down like that. It's exactly what we want from a watercolor type effect. Okay, so I'll show you one more time. Right in here we have an overlap. It's overlapping right here, so we get that. And then really light pressure to spread out that pencil. And then right down in here again. Anywhere where there's an overlap, you want to create this shadow. So if you'd like to learn more of the tips and tricks and different things you can do with these powerful little tools, then follow the link in the video description and you can see our workshops. I think it's called Watercolor Pencil Workshops, and you can learn more there. Okay, let's keep going here with adding our shading with our pencil. And one question I get a lot about watercolor pencils is how do you sharpen them? And some of them are more delicate than others, and if you do the trick that I showed you where you get the tip wet, that can make that tip very delicate, so you want to be careful. So I highly recommend using a very simple handheld pencil sharpener like the Comb. The Comb is one of my absolute favorite. It has a German blade on it, so it's super, super sharp. Lasts a long time. You'll love it, and it works great. And we're going to just sharpen it real quick. Remember, whenever you're sharpening a pencil with a handheld sharpener, that you hold your pencil steady and you move the sharpener around the tip, and that will help protect the pencil, and you get a nice sharp tip and you're ready to go again. Okay, so here again I feel like it got a little bit rough with our shading, so I'm just going to, with a very almost not wet but a tiny bit wet brush, smooth that out with some flicks. And I don't like how I missed right here when I did the base layer, so I'm just going to grab a little color off the tip of my pencil and fill it in just quick and easy like that. Okay, I'm going to finish the last 3 petals here with some shading, and then we'll work on the center of the flower. Alright, we've got the basic shape of the flower done and all of the red petals done. Now I want to move to these center petals and create that orange, sort of attract the bees to come to the middle of the flower look. That's what I want to do. So we'll take another pencil. So what's so cool to me is we've only used one pencil. We did all of that different variety of tones and values all with one pencil. So if you can only afford a small set of the Albrecht Durer, you can see how it's going to go a long ways for you. You don't need the full set unless you're like me and you suffer from FSS and you need the full set of everything. I'm going to keep this pencil out so we remember which one we used. I want to use something kind of bright, maybe this one right here. Let's see what I picked. We've got dark chrome yellow number 109 for the next part. We're going to follow step 4 and step 5 again. Step 4, remember, was to use it wet as a base layer and then come in with the pencil to start adding shading. And we might even throw in a little bit of the red here in the center as well. So let's start with step number 4, which is to use it as a base layer. Okay, we've got the base layer in those center petals done, and something I wanted to mention that happened to me here as I was working, and you can see it right here. I'm going to bring it up to the screen. You can see how some of the red crumbs from the petal below this petal were picked up and activated by my wet brush, and we got some streaks of red in there. Now again, like I said before, sometimes things happen that you didn't quite predict would happen when you're working with watercolor. The more you practice with watercolor, the more that will be easy to take into account, and you'll be able to just incorporate those beautiful effects into your vision that you have for the flower. Now, I kind of knew that this might happen because I've worked with watercolor pencils before, so it doesn't upset me. And like I said before we started with the base layer, I was already sort of planning on using some of this red color into the orange centers. So it's totally awesome. Don't get upset when something like that happens with this medium. Just go with the flow. All right, so let's do our tip number 5 again, which is now to use the same pencil, and we're going to use it dry over the wet. I think this has had enough time to dry. Yeah, it feels dry to the touch. We're going to follow the same ideas. This time though, I think I'm going to do some like flicking. Instead of light shading where you do heavy and light pressure, I think I'm going to try some flicking and bring in our red into those flicks as well. Try to get some texture moving in there. Ooh, I like that. That's pretty. Okay, let's try this petal right here. Do the same thing, a few flicks with the red. Again, this is number 121 Pale Geranium Lake. And then flicks with my full strength yellow, which is what we painted the petal with in the first place. That's pretty. I like that a lot. So my yellow again that I'm using is dark chrome yellow 109. I'm just going to follow all the way around this petal, these petals now, with my flick motions to create that beautiful effect. Okay, we have our texture all laid down, and so far we've only used 2 pencils and we've created all this different look, the different values and everything. Is so exciting to me. But we did have one oops, I don't think you noticed, but I will show you now my oops, and that's on this petal right here. It was too wet when I came in on top of it. When I started doing the flicks, it dug right into the paper, and if you could feel it here, you would see the problem. Let me try this other angle, see if you can see how it's all bubbled up now. And that is a little oops, but I don't think it's going to be noticeable. But it is what I was warning you about. If you're using cardstock, those little sponges weren't dry, and when I went in with the sharp point of my pencil, it oopsed them and pushed them and made them go a little funny.
Yeah, I see what you mean. I think it was hard to see on camera. But
yeah, hard to see on camera, hard to see in person, and I think as it dries, it will be less and less noticeable. So again, if something goes wrong, stay calm, don't overreact, let it be part of your coloring, and you'll learn from it and remember better next time to let it dry a little longer. Now I have a bonus tip for you. This is tip number 6, and that's how we're going to color the center. I want that center to be really red, really dark. And I really want to stick with just using 2 pencils because I love this idea of how much you can get out of just a couple watercolor pencils. So what we're going to do is my bonus tip number 6. I'm going to take the water, and instead of using a brush and dipping the brush into the water and then touching the tip of the pencil, we're going to take the whole pencil and touch just the tip into the water. And what that does is softens that core and makes it so it lays down super thick and dark. Look at that. Makes me so happy. And you can usually color several spots with one dipping. You'll start to feel it get less slick, and you'll know it's starting to dry, and you just re-dip it into your water and go again. This uses a lot of core really fast, so I wouldn't want to color an entire coloring page this way. You would use up your pencils fast. But for little detail areas like this where you want it to be really solid and dark and vibrant, this is
I guess that makes sense really why it's
good.
More vibrant.
Yeah. Again, same pencil as what I used on the outside. So much variety with just one pencil.
Wow, it's really pretty.
Watercolor pencils are really cool. I'm going to do the majority of them this deep red, but I'm also going to do some orange just because it's fun. And remember, once you have used it this way, you need to dry it off with your paper towel, or that water's just going to sit on that tip and continue to sort of, as I say, mushify. It will mushify it. So where did my orange pencil go?
Try that.
Oh, it was hiding. So we're going to do the same thing with this pencil. Dip it into the water, let it soften for just a second, and then away we go. And we'll see how vibrant this one will color down. Look how vibrant. Oh, it just makes me so happy that just two pencils can do all of this. Watercolor pencils are really neat. Now, that got a little too wet. I don't want to activate the red. This one activated the red next to it a little bit, which I'm not mad at. Again, this is watercolor, so I'm just going to embrace it, and it's just going to look even more natural. When you look at flowers in nature, which is another suggestion, maybe this is bonus tip number 7, yeah. Is to look at flowers out in your garden. Out next time you go for a walk, look at them and you'll see how the petals have a huge variety of value. They go from dark to light. They sometimes have dark going on in weird places. I mean, it's nature. It's not going to be computer perfect out in nature, so embrace that as you're working with your watercolor pencils. I'm going to just tap one tap there. What was happening is the ink, the paint was starting to get on top of my illustrated lines, so by just tapping once into it, it lifted all that out and left me with this beautiful center. Look how pretty that center is.
Yeah, it's really pretty.
Oh, makes me so happy. Now we could keep going. I could incorporate other different colors to add even more depth and dimension if I wanted to, more shadows. Again, we could work with a light source, add some white highlights. There's lots we can do, but what is really cool to me is we succeeded at making a beautiful flower with very bright colors with just 2 pencils. And how cool is that?
On cardstock.
On cardstock, not even on watercolor paper.
What do you expect would have gone different had you used watercolor paper?
Watercolor paper would have been a little less finicky. We wouldn't have had that problem where my tips of my pencils dug into the paper because, like I said before, it sort of floats on the top of the watercolor paper. So it would have been less finicky, probably a little faster and a little bit easier, to be honest. But I wanted to prove to you that you can do it on cardstock in a coloring book and practice your watercolor flowers this way so that you can learn how the petals are drawn and illustrated. That's a really big part of learning how to do your own freehand flowers, is studying and learning how other illustrators have rendered those flowers so that you can then do it your way even better and in more of your vision. So that's my 6. Did we end up with 6 tips, or was it 7?
We had the bonus 7. Yeah.
So we ended up with 7 tips for you, 2 bonus ones at the end, and hopefully this will get you inspired and let you get out your watercolor pencils and do something beautiful like this. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you all have a wonderful watercolor pencil filled day. Bye-bye, everyone.
The pillow's not right.
It's just not right. You can't do a YouTube video if your pillow is not right.
Is that true?
Okay. Are you done? Did you get it fixed? Okay. So tip number 2 is all about paper.